year, and that we have to comply, and then therefore we have to find the resources to comply with those rules as well.
Thank you. And my last question is, in the previous fiscal year, it was realized that we'd have approximately a $35 million surplus. And I know it was well publicized and stated in a number of public meetings on the record what that $35 million went toward. But if you wouldn't mind just summarizing the long-term debt and then the reserves contributions we made, but then also the $5 or so million that was left is what we're looking at here tonight, right? So if you just share a little bit about the 20 million, the 9 or 10 million, and then the remaining 5 million.
When we came last time to City Council, we were anticipating and that was during the budget process. We were anticipating in the general fund specifically a surplus of $35 million. It came out a little bit higher than that at the end of the fiscal year, and we'll be sharing that information in the next couple of weeks when we provide the audited financial statements. At that time, the staff was recommending the City Council to make certain allocations of that surplus funds, and all that was included in those reports. The first is to accelerate the building the operating reserves. Like the city had a reserve policy that has a target to reach 16.6% by fiscal year 27-28. The surplus that we identified last year for the general fund allow us to meet that goal sooner. And that was the first recommendation. Let's build the reserves. Let's put that aside. Let's put that rainy day all the way to the full. That was the first step, and that basically required around, if I remember correctly, around 7 million of that 35 million that we were estimating. The second recommendation was to address the long-term pension debt for the city. The city, as part of the California public system, has a big liability that is in our books. And that is owed to the employees and current retirees. So in order to address that long-term debt, the recommendation was to apply $20 million to that. And that was made with two ways. One was to make a payment directly to CalPERS, what is called an advance payment. And the other part that we also will be bringing to council pretty soon is the implementation 115 trust, where to put to fund both for pension and other post-employment benefits, or that is also called OPEB. So those actions basically will also make good use of that surplus. In addition to that, there was like a one-time request that they were kind of identified through the budget process that allows basically just, there was a conversation here at City Council about capital projects, and there was an additional $900,000 that was applied to the actual CIP. Through the fiscal year, there's been some actions that have been coming through City Council that have been kind of requesting use of some of those resources as the departments need that they needed to be used. So that's kind of a high-level summary of what the use of that surplus.
Great. Thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Perlo.
Thank you very much for the presentation and the work that you've done here and your staff. I appreciate everybody in finance. If we don't have the money, the wheels don't run. So thank you very much. Earlier in the evening, we had a bit of information given to us about the need to increase the public liability and property insurance fund. Can you explain why we need to put money in that and what this fund is used for? Public liability and property insurance fund. I see Mr. Moore is gone, but oh, he's here. Okay, maybe he can help. But I think it would be beneficial for the public to hear this.
Yeah, definitely. I'll give it a try, and I'm sure Mike can just step in.
I didn't see you, Michael. I'm sorry.
To make sure that I'm not misrepresenting anything. But basically, we track in two separate funds all the claims related to general liability for the city. and also for all the workers' compensation related liabilities for the city. What we have observed is that the number of claims and the dollar amount of those claims has it's been significantly at the end of in the middle of the fiscal year. It's coming much higher than we were anticipating. So if those claims follow the same trend that we have seen so far in this fiscal year, with the amount that is allocated in the budget, we're not going to have enough funds to cover for all those claims. So the recommendation that is in front of council is trying to based on the best estimate that the staff has done, based on the trend of those claims, to cover for those potential future claims for the fiscal year.
Okay. Mr. Moore, do you want to add anything to that?
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Perillo, what Javier said is correct, and I would attribute the request for additional funds to a number of very large claims that have settled during this fiscal year, many of which we've discussed in closed session that are high dollar claims, and so that has pushed us over our budget. All of these claims have been reserved for in our liability reserve, so we're just moving the cash over to pay it in the current fiscal year, and then our liabilities are lower because we paid those claims out. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Thank you very much. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other comments on this side? Councilmember Starr, do you have anything you want to add?
So I guess what I'd like to do is, I assume we're going to make a motion to adopt this. So I want to divide that question, or divide that motion rather. So the street maintenance infrastructure use fee revenue and the corresponding environmental resources operating fund expense for $1,024,234. One is expense, one is for revenue. I'd like to vote on that separately from the rest of it, because I do intend to vote no on that, because I don't think we can legally charge that.
So just separate that item out?
Just you'll have two votes. One vote is for everything else, and the other vote is for the two funds, the IUF related, so the street maintenance infrastructure use fee and the environmental resources operating fund.
Just clarification, Mayor. Are we separating number one and number two, or you're breaking down item number two into multiple spots?
So basically, basically the Fund 105 and Fund 631, I want to vote those on as a pair, and then vote for the rest of them in one vote. I mean, I think the methodology that went into developing this looks fine.
Yeah.
I think the numbers are great. They make sense. I just can't vote for the infrastructure use fee portion of it. So that's why I want to divide that, so we can do that.
So you're making a motion now? You want to just make a motion?
So I guess the motion is to adopt staff's proposal.
Okay.
And then I'm making a demand that it be divided. So I guess first, if you can second the motion, and then what I'll do is I'll ask for it to be divided. So I'll make the motion that we adopt staff's report, if someone will second that first.
Yeah, I will second that.
Okay. And then I will make a motion that to divide, actually it's not a motion, it's a demand to divide this, so that the changes to Funds 105 and the change to Fund 631 are a separate vote. They're together, but they're a separate vote from the rest.
Okay.
Just
That's
a
fine.
question, Mayor.
Yes.
City Attorney, couldn't we just take those two, basically cherry pick those two out, put them aside without having to go through multiple motions?
So I'd like to address a couple parliamentary points here. So the good book provides at
Good book, yeah.
chapter 47, verse 35, that you don't need to take a vote to receive or file something. So that's what we went through on L1. So that deals, I think, with the first part of Councilman Starr's request. So on the second request, what he's asking for is a division of the question. So he's basically saying that in item 2 of the recommendation, each of those funds could be treated as a standalone item that could be voted on separately, and whether one falls or not, it doesn't matter for the rest of them. So that is appropriate, and in this case, I think he's viewing it as a circumstance where he can't just demand it, he has to make a motion for it. So in that,
I think I can demand it under, I think.
well, you'd asked for a second, so.
Well, no, ask for a second on the main motion.
Okay.
And then what I'm doing is I'm just simply demanding that the motion then be divided, which in this case I can do. And actually, Ms. Purcell is actually a professional registered parliamentarian. I think she would point you to 2710, thank you. So
I thought you said you wanted a second, so.
only on the first motion, which I got.
Okay, so,
He's got a second from Mayor Pro Tem on the first motion, but he wants to separate
Yep.
items 105 and 631.
Just make it real quick. I just want 2 votes. I don't think it'll take long.
which is essentially what you were getting at, Councilmember Perrello, that just asking to separate that out.
He could have done it, okay, thank you. Could have been cleaner.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, you have something?
Oh, I was just going to add, I have no issue with Councilmember Starr's request, so
Yeah.
I'm happy as I, second the main motion he made, and if he's doing the demand to separate those out, I have no problem with that.
Okay. Thank you. Can we take a vote on the, on what's on the table now, and then we'll do a second on this?
Do you want to vote on everything else first, and then the 2 items that I
Yeah.
want separate, that
Yeah.
works?
Okay, just for the record, we have no public speakers in person or virtually, and then we'll start with Councilman Starr.
Yes on the items except for those 2, yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Teran,
Yes.
Councilwoman Perez,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilwoman Basua, Mayor MacArthur,
Yes.
and Councilmember Perallo.
Yes,
And that motion carries 7-0. And then if we can take a vote for the IUF, separating funds 105 and 631.
Correct. Yep.
And we will start with Mayor Pro Tem Teran,
Yes, to approve.
Councilwoman Perez,
Yes.
Councilwoman Rodriguez,
Aye.
Councilman Starr,
No.
Councilwoman Basua, Mayor MacArthur,
Yes.
Councilmember Perallo,
yes,
and the motion carries 6-1 with Councilmember Starr voting no on on Fund 105 and 631.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate all of staff being here to entertain any questions that we might have. Also, just like to make a motion, we're coming up on 10 o'clock.
I'll second.
motion.
Okay. We got a motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
We have a second by Mayor Pro Tem. Can we get a vote on that?
Okay, Councilwoman Rodriguez,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Teran,
Yes.
Councilwoman Perez,
Yes.
Councilman Starr,
Yes.
Councilwoman Basua, Mayor MacArthur,
Yes.
Councilmember Perallo,
Yes,
and the motion carries 7-0.
Thank you. We'll go now to item L3. This is from the Human Resources Department. Memorandum of Understanding between the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association. The recommendations that the City Council, the City of Oxnard adopted a resolution approving the attached tentative agreement between the City of Oxnard and the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association, otherwise known as OPSMA, that are proposed to be integrated with the terms of the existing memorandum of understanding MOU between the city and OPSMA. The integrated document shall be the successor MOU for the term July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2027. Any council members have any questions of Mr. Navu on this item? Madam Clerk,
We have one
We
speaker,
have one speaker.
Mr. Littell.
Yeah.
Thank you. Prior to the speaker, Mr. Navu, if you wouldn't mind also just giving a quick summary of what we have in front of us, just so we have that for transparency.
Sure. Thank you, Councilman Tron. Steve Naveau, Human Resources Director. So the item before you tonight is to approve a memorandum of understanding with the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association. It's for a 3-year term. It covers the items that we have in the agenda item, from salary increases, standby pay, holiday hours, et cetera. The total percent increase over the term of the contract's 15.09%. I don't think I gave a description of who's in this bargaining unit. So this bargaining unit consists of police commanders, assistant police chiefs, fire battalion chiefs, and assistant fire chiefs.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Patel? Thank you, Ray.
Thank you. Mayor, council members, city staff. It is stated in the agenda packet that the total estimated cost of this package for the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association for the 3-year period is $869,121. This again is misleading and a misrepresentation of the truth. Two costing methodologies are listed in the packet: labor costing and budget costing. The city of Oxnard likes to use the labor costing methodology to describe the total estimated cost. This method depicts how much the benefit package costs will increase every year. These cost increases, or cost deltas, are then summed to derive a total. But this is only a summation of the annual cost deltas and neglects the compounding effect, which would include the cost of the prior years added to the current year. The second costing method listed is the budget methodology. This method represents the true total cost of the benefit package to the taxpaying public. I have personally demonstrated to a council member and a city manager how this works using a simple example of the increasing cost of a gallon of gasoline over a 3-year period. However, this demonstration again is falling on deaf ears and blind eyes as the city staff continues to misrepresent the true total cost of the benefit packages for their labor unions. The city can play around with this so-called labor methodology all at once. However, when it comes time to describing how deeply the city will be reaching into the taxpayers' pockets, I think the city should finally come clean. To be perfectly open and transparent to the council and the taxpaying public, the first sentence of the paragraph titled Financial Impact should read as follows. The total estimated cost of this package for OPSMA for the 3-year period is $1,714,859. Thus, the true total cost of the package for a 3-year period is over 97% greater than the city has claimed in the agenda packet. As a matter of fact, even the budget methodology of $1,714,859 does not paint the total picture. Recall that the values listed are delta values. The value listed for the 24-25 in the agenda packet is the increase over and above the value for 23-24. Therefore, one must add the prior delta cost, that is, from the 23-24 delta cost, and even the prior years. Make no mistakes, this council will approve this just as they have every year. But here's the thing, I can stand up here and speak for 3 minutes on this issue until I turn blue, and the city refuses to change. However, the seven of you can sit up there and compel the city to finally tell the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Yeah. Do we have any additional speakers?
Mayor, that actually concludes all of our speakers in person and virtually. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you. Mr. Naveau, I'm wondering if you wouldn't mind taking a moment to explain. There is actually a slide in the presentation as well as some extended information in the agenda report regarding the labor methodology versus the budget methodology. I appreciate that being placed in the reports itself, but if you have some additional information you can share on that.
Yeah, so Mr. Patel is correct. As we show in the agenda item, under the budget methodology, it is 1.714859. So we have the same number. We show the labor methodology as a year over year, because technically these could be 1-year contracts. And when you negotiate contracts like this, the opposing side, that's how they look at it, is they look at it as each individual year and then what's the increase in the next year. And that's how labor people do it. That's how labor professionals do it. That's how the bargaining units would see it. And that's why we show both ways, because finance people look at it a particular way where it would be 1.7. Labor folks would look at it as it's a year over year increase in the contract. So each year becomes your new base year is how they visualize it. So I'm trying to kind of appease both. You have the employee groups, the unions, they'll see it one way, whereas budget folks will see a cumulative effect of 1.7.
All right, thank you for that. And just as a side note, I appreciate the analogy of increasing of gas prices. I thought those were supposed to go down. I haven't seen that yet, but all right. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Starr?
Yeah, I guess me being a finance sort of person, I'm always going to look at it from the budget methodology standpoint. So I think that really should be the primary number that gets presented. It's okay to have the labor number there as well, but I think to really understand the true cost to all of us, it really is, it's the money out of your pocket, and it really is $1.7 million. It isn't $869. So I think I don't need to die on this hill, but my preference would be that in future reports, just lead with the budget methodology. You want to include the labor methodology as well? Be my guest. But I got to look at what is this really costing taxpayers, and to kind of give you an idea of one of the reasons why I'd have trouble with the labor methodology is, well, let's say for example right now, let's say you have $1,200,000 increase in year one, $1,200,000 increase in year two, $1,200,000 in year three. Well, really, it's $1.2 million, it's $2.4 million, and it's 3.6. So I added those up together. I think that's 7.2 million. So it's not $1.2 million times 3.6. It's 7.2 million. But imagine if you were to say, hey, we're increasing this compensation in January. Well, that's a $100,000 increase in January. Well, we're not increasing any more during the year, so the cost for all of the year ends up being only $100,000 because we're not counting what it's costing us for the rest of the year. And then you're saying, okay, well, the next time we do an increase of $100,000 per month in year two, then you say, okay, well, that's only really a $100,000 increase because the rest of the year, that's all built in. And then, so you could wind up, if you do that in 3 years, you can come up with a small number of $300,000 if you do it that way, but it's not reality. And I get that this labor methodology is for your negotiations, but at the end of the day, I think Mr. Blotell has a point. It really is the full amount. So let's just report on that, and make it our headline number. I do want to talk about the merits of this proposal, which I am in favor of it. I see one of the problems here is that since we're talking about middle management here, or I'm sorry, the safety managers, the problem that we're having today, as I understand it, is that the folks that are working under them, they're earning lots of overtime. Kind of the differential between what they're able to make versus what these managers are able to make gets smaller and smaller. And it's harder to get someone to take on that job when they can just stick around and just, get the overtime rates. So to get rid of this, I guess it's a compression of wages. I don't know what you want to call that. But to address that, it does make sense to increase the wages of these managers. What's not really being addressed, and this is the big problem, I think, that the elephant in the room is that we're paying a ton of overtime. And some of that has to do with the fact that we're having trouble with recruiting enough people, so people are forced to work overtime. But in the long run, I hope that what we can do is address that aspect. I'm not saying I've got a solution. I know lots of smarter people than me are trying to figure this out. But I hope that at some point we can figure that out so we can bring overtime rates to a more reasonable level. And then we don't have these conversations about having to avoid this compression of wages. So that's my position, and I will be voting in favor of this when it comes time for that motion.
Okay. Well, I make a motion to adopt it. Yeah, do you have any? Yes, I'm sorry, Miss somebody?
Oh, thank you. No, thank you for shining a light on several of the points that you just shared. Am I mistaken? I believe that there's been an overtime evaluation or an assessment. When was the last time that a study has been done in regards to No, not for this specific case?
Are you talking just for police or fire or both?
Well, I believe this applies to both, right? Because I
Yes.
believe historically, there's been a study of the overtime compensation versus hiring additional folks. Am I mistaken, maybe?
Are you speaking of like for fire, how they run kind of a constant staffing model?
Well, when was the last time that we have evaluated like our ability or long-term sustainability of paying folks overtime? Maybe I'm crossing my wires with police and not fire. Thank you, Chief.
I'm just kind of going off the top of my head, but I believe it was about 7 or 8 years ago, the city finance office contracted an independent firm to review the use of overtime.
Correct. So about 6 or 7 years ago, there was a firm that was evaluating the use of overtime, right?
It was at least that. It was, my guess is it was prior to 2018.
So I think there's several issues that my counterpart here is shining a light on. Is yes, folks have to or maybe raise their hand to do overtime, and the reason why this is so needed is because middle management doesn't have those same opportunities, right? We become exempt, and it's kind of a catch-22, at least for our budget.
I think you're
Correct.
referring to the compaction between
Yes, the compaction.
sergeant and the manager rank. That's correct.
Okay. So I think it's a much bigger picture. It's retaining talent. It's making sure that we're giving a fair living wage, and also I think it'd be important for us to evaluate how practical it would be for us to take a different route. But thank you very much for addressing that. And again, it was from memory, just based on what was shared. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mayor Pro Tem, then Mr. Ferraro, you'll follow in there. Yeah.
I already got an opportunity to speak. I'm willing to let Councilmember Perillo go first. Oh, okay, well, just very quickly, Councilmember Starr brought up a few points. Just one for clarification, and I see we have both chiefs here. It was mentioned about the challenges in recruitment. Just so it's clear, it's not necessarily that the city of Oxnard itself has a challenge in recruiting, but I'll lean first on Chief Benitez as far as the profession of policing itself is experiencing a lull or challenges in recruiting new officers to the profession itself. Is that correct?
That is 100% correct. It's not just a statewide issue, but it is a national issue. In fact, I even heard a bit on KNX yesterday about this in Los Angeles, for example. Very, very significant problem. But most agencies across the state are suffering from a lack of applicants. People do not want to do this job as much as they did 7 years ago. Our case, 2017, we had about 1,300 applicants for a police officer. I believe it bottomed out in 2023 at about just over 600 applicants. So that gives you an idea of what we've got coming in. High vacancy rates are plaguing this industry.
Yeah, and I would imagine that leads to, or it exacerbates the issue of overtime for our, our police officer level and corporal level and sergeant level staff. Is that correct?
It's exactly that, because one of the core functions is to field shifts of first responders. And when you have vacancies, you have to have overtime to staff those shifts, which you cannot not staff. And so backfill overtime for those vacancies is the primary driver for police overtime. At least I can say that for our department.
And as it is germane to this particular item, when we get to the commander level, we talked about compaction already, but if we have fewer applicants coming into the profession to start with, you can see how that will have a ripple effect as it goes rising up through the ranks there. Is that correct?
It does, and what you could foreseeably have is situations where people do not want to be managers in a particular agency, which means then the agencies are now looking outside of their own agency to recruit mid-level managers and above. You can typically see that for chiefs on occasion, but for mid-managers, that's very troubling when you have to go have to go to the middle echelon of your agency to staff it, because nobody wants to be a manager in the agency.
Yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate that. And then Chief Hamilton, I don't know if there's another perspective we can have on fire and how it pertains to recruitment and retention at the frontline levels or at the entry levels, and then how that speaks to the battalion chief level.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, thank you for your question. So for recruitment, we from the last academy we did to the academy before, we actually dropped about 30% in the number of applicants. So it was a significant drop. Thankfully, we still saw quality applicants at the top of the list. And so we were very fortunate to get top quality candidates coming through. At the moment, we've done very well in terms of morale and esprit de corps, where we haven't seen a lot of folks leave. And so we're actually looking to delay our next academy till the beginning of 2027 because we have only a very small amount of vacancies. Obviously, as those vacancies creep up, that's when we're going to start having overtime impacts. But yeah, of our chief officer ranks to which this MOU relates to, 6 or 7 of them will be retiring in the next 3 to 5 years. And so it's very important for us to maintain that continuity moving up the ranks. Thank you.
And I know Chief Benitez stepped away. For both of you, you could just nod your heads yes if you'd like. We're speaking to the mic. But I imagine when you have fewer applicants coming into the agencies, we are having this not never-ending battle of retirees and then resignations and then people leaving the profession altogether. And we don't have the feed coming in to backfill that as time goes on. And I believe our commander level and our battalion chief level are probably at a midpoint or at a point in their careers where retirement is probably not too far off for a number of them, correct? Okay. All right.
Yeah, just to that point, one of the things, the way we tried to structure this, and HR Director Nouveau was very good at sort of creating a little bit of a gap between top step captain and top step battalion chief in the hope that we can get folks that will move into those positions and stay in them for quite some time. So that was part of the goal that we're trying to address with this MOU.
Thank you. And the last thing I'll say, it just occurred to me with Chief Hamilton's, one of his statements, and I've heard it from Chief Benitez as well, is that we are, yes, as an agency like many other agencies across the nation, we have a number of high vacancies, or we have a high vacancy rate, and it fluctuates. But I appreciate both of you really seeking out and bringing on board high quality candidates and not just filling warm bodies just for the sake of filling those positions. That certainly shows your dedication to this community and making sure that we have high quality candidates who will our community will be well served by them and what they're going to do for our agencies.
That's a very strong point for us. We would rather take the vacancies than hire substandard employees, because in the end, you end up, it causes more harm than good, and you can radically change the culture of your department by doing that. So we will not do that. We will not compromise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolutely. Councilmember Pearl.
Yes, just a couple of points. I agree with Councilman Starr completely on trying to do away with overtime. Mine's a little bit differently. The cost is a big deal, but I want a policeman and a fireman rested. I don't want them having to work all the hours, because I know that when I've been on jobs where you're working more than 12 hours, back to back, you make mistakes. And the types of mistakes that can be made, we just had an explanation. We haven't had them here, but we just had an explanation about why we have to increase our insurance. So I understand completely about the deal about overtime. And it's not to gyp somebody out overtime. But the question that I have, we've had the Speaker, Mr. Blattel, come up multiple times and bring the issue up about how the money is addressed and how it is presented, the funds. And I appreciate Mr. Nouveau, but you're showing both sides. Give me a reason why we don't do it as Mr. Blattel is saying. Is it, and I apologize, give me a reason, and I'm wondering, is it simply as a statement, Mr. Blattel, to, I think he said somewhat, appease the unions? It's how they look at it, or maybe it was you, somehow that came up. And the people that work for the city are extremely important. We had Speaker call in a while back, protecting the people that work here. But the people that pay the bills for the city, that employ the workers that work here, are as extremely important. And Mr. Blattel brings up a point that they should know what the actual costs are. But you show both sides. Why do we, give me a devil's advocate, why are we not doing it the way he is describing?
Sure. So
Please.
I think, we are showing both ways of doing it.
Agreed.
I think the point is well taken of, we can lead with that budget methodology. lead with that, and then, but then still put the labor methodology under it and still explain it. That's not an issue. We can switch how we're doing that in future contracts.
Is there a rationale why we wouldn't do that? I mean, we can do that, as you've just said, but is there a rationale why we couldn't? Maybe the city manager can help, or somebody. I mean, why?
Yeah, to be quite honest, I looked at it as we're showing both. I didn't think of it in terms of I should, headline or lead with this number versus that number. I looked at it as I'm presenting both numbers here. So I didn't really get what that difference is. To me, I felt that was being transparent. I'm showing both costs or how you can cost it both ways. Okay. And at the end of the day, come out with the same percentage increase to payroll at the end of the contract.
Because in my mind, I try to come up with an idea, something that would make some sense about how I look at things. Mm-hmm. I fill up my car, $60. Fill up my car, $60. It's $60. It's not the third time that I fill up the car, it's $180. It's $60 when I fill up the car. Sure. And I was wondering, and it's obviously not making a click here, but it isn't just to silence Mr. Blattell, but he brings up a good point. We have a council member that's bringing it up also, and I just wanted to get an explanation. I think that, staff can talk it out and figure out, do we change that? Does it take an act of God, or are we breaking any rules? Are we gonna get the unions mad? I don't wanna get everybody mad, but being a little easy to understand, maybe it would be helpful.
Yeah, no, and that's not a problem. I mean, the unions look at it, they look at each year discreetly because frankly, they can, put out, we just want a 1-year contract. If you do a 1-year contract, well, that's now your base year. They negotiate another 1-year contract. You don't ramp them up the way you would in the budget methodology if it's a 1-year discrete contract each time, and yet that cost over time could still be kind of what you show in that budget methodology, but you wouldn't present it that way because it's a 1-year contract. So that's some of the thinking on the labor side, why they look at it more each year as a discrete year and not as something that's compounding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Rodriguez had a question.
Well, I would like to carry on with the conversation and move on with your agenda, but the one only point I wanted to make was my concern with changing the headline and giving that compound possibility is that if there's a negotiation and that now promise for 3 years or whatnot is inaccurate, then we're back to square one. So just plain devil's advocate, changing the headline potentially could not solve our problem at the end of the day, right? So there's no guarantees that will actually be the number is basically my other point, but I would like to carry on with the conversation.
Good.
One of the strongest things that I learned when I got on the council years ago, don't make a mistake, Bert, don't make a mistake. I got on the council and I asked a question about labor negotiations, and it was like this: we're going to automatically go this way, we're going to automatically go that way. And of course, Mr. Parolo, you understand when we start with labor negotiations, we start from zero. We start from zero. What does that mean? It means that you can go where you want to go, and you can start with the assumption that an individual working for the city is making X. And then if you want to increase it, you go X plus, instead of going from zero to try to get to X. But when you start negotiations with labor, correct me if I'm wrong, it starts from zero. Basically, there's no guarantee, when the contract is over, there's no guarantee that the person is making the same as he was making the day before the contract expired.
I mean, that is correct. When you start negotiations, everything is on the table.
And I still remember that because I was like, whoa, how did I not know that?
Sure.
Thank you. That's one.
Thank you. Councilmember Starr?
Yeah, just to clarify some things, and by the way, I didn't see that there was anything nefarious about your one method versus the other. I just think that the headline number should be what the real total outlay would be. It's hard to talk at this time of night. So one thing I'd like to point out, which I think is very good, I think you do a good job at this, is that while I guess while the employees get 5% raises each year, it's within a range.
Correct.
And you've established the range. If they hit the top of the range, that's it. They stay there until at some point if we change the range again. So I think that your approach has been very good. I think it kind of pushes back a little bit, which I think we need to do sometimes. So I just want to compliment you on that. I do have a request. Maybe this for be a future agenda item, maybe it's some sort of study or something. But I don't know. I'd like to believe that maybe there are some agencies out there, and maybe they have circumstances that are unique to them. But I assume there are some agencies out there where their overtime is not as high as ours. Or it may turn out that ours are pretty low compared to others. I don't know. But it would be nice to have some sort of comparison with other agencies, what their experience has been with overtime costs, and maybe there's some best practices that others are doing that we can take advantage of and just bring these numbers down. I want to, so that's a request. I do want to point out that based on my conversation with Chief Benitez was it yesterday, I think it was? It seems like you're doing a better job of recruiting now, and you're able to get people to go through the academies, and it sounds like we're kind of on our way to addressing this shortage in the long haul. So I think we're heading in the right direction there. I think one of the challenges that we have is, and Bert Perillo is absolutely right, the biggest concern, more than the money, is having people who are so tired that they can't do their job well, or they can do it where they make, sometimes you have to make snap decisions, and I'm sure that if you're on the clock in hour 12, maybe your decisions aren't as good as they were at hour 1. So for public safety purposes, being able to figure out ways to reduce overtime, I think would be helpful. I think one of the things that problems that we've created for ourselves over the years, I mean, there used to be a time when we had a less generous retirement program in the state, and people worked many more years as a result because they couldn't retire earlier. And now that they can, they do. And I mean, yeah, I'd love to retire at 50 or mid-50s. I'm in my 60s now, and I still have many years of work ahead of me, but I like doing what I do, so it's okay. But part of the problem with these retirements is that we're losing experienced officers, and what you don't want is you don't want just all rookies, because they don't have the experience and they haven't built up all those judgment decisions that somebody who's been on the job 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, or dare I say 30, that have. So I think it's a problem we've created for ourselves, and we're just going to have to deal with it as best we can. But those are all my comments.
Thank you. Yes, Councilwoman Basul.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't want to, I'm going to say this comment as far as the labor and the budget mythology. I personally appreciate it, and the reason I like that staff brings this is, for example, as we get into our budget, we're going to see that 5.31 is going to be because of this labor. So we're going to see an additional 5.31. The following year, we're going to see an additional whatever that is. So to me, it makes perfect sense because I'm looking on a year-to-year basis. And correct me if I'm wrong, but the way we budget is we take what we had this year and we take those numbers in order to get our budget for the next second year, third year, fourth year. So in order to better utilize this and for public viewing purpose, I think the way that this is presented is the proper way. And it's just, what I've seen over the years working in government, and it just makes, it's easier to explain to the general public.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, I move to adopt the item as recommended by staff. Is there a second on this item?
I will second.
So we have a first and a second. Madam Clerk, can we get a vote?
Mayor MacArthur?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Teran?
Yes.
Councilwoman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Councilmember Starr?
Yes.
Councilwoman Basua?
Aye.
Councilmember Perallo?
Yes.
Councilwoman Bettis?
Yes.
And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item L4, Public Works. Subject grant application to the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Grant Program for Durley Park Improvement Project. The recommendation from staff is that the City Council approve and authorize One, the submission of a grant application to the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Partnership Grant Program in an amount not to exceed $6 million with a one-to-one match requirement that is currently funded by a state grant for the Durley Park Improvement Project. City manager designee to execute the grant agreements, finance director or designee to submit financial reports, grant claims, and approve budget appropriations for the use of grant funds, and public works director or designee to submit non-financial reports. Any council members have any questions of staff on this item? No. Yes, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Wolf. Just as with the other items, if we can get just a quick summary, either from yourself or staff, on what we have in front of us. And I'm not shy in saying that I enjoy when these come to us because when we're looking at bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, it's something that is certainly one of my priorities. So appreciate this coming forward. But if we have a quick summary, just for transparency.
Okay, so this is the a grant application for Durley Park. We have an existing grant for this project.
Excuse me on that.
That's okay.
I was ready to go home.
I was trying to
I'm
help
moving
you.
us ahead one item.
Just trying to help you roll into this one a little bit.
Yes. Same question. Can we summarize the Durley Park grant, which explains why Mr. Hummel came up to the front row on this one too?
So we do have an existing grant for this project. We got it a couple years back for design of this project. As we get through the design and the outreach, we're noticing with the inflation that we're seeing across lots of different industries, the estimates for what the community wanted, what the original design grant required, we are seeing a potential budget shortfall with the estimates. And so we are recommending that we go after an additional grant to go ahead and finish we can finish the design with the money, but we want to construct what the community is asking for. And we think in order to do that, we'd like to supplement the current grant that we have with potential going after another grant. Now, what that means is that we would extend the timeline for this project to try to get that second grant. So this staff report lays out that timeline a little bit and makes a recommendation to go after that second grant to potentially fill that funding gap that we are estimating if we do bid it out with its current full design elements.
Thank you, and I appreciate the transparency in the agenda report and on the presentation. In adjusting timelines, if we wouldn't mind just sharing, if in going for this grant, there's a potential for a project delay of about 1 year. Can we just share the logistics behind, why that is? And it says very clearly that, that may be worth the chance of receiving an additional $6 million, but if we can talk about why there would be that delay in that.
So we would submit the grant, I think it's tomorrow, right, Eric? Next week, the grant application, if we go after this second grant, would be due next week. And then the timeline on page 398 outlines what that looks like. So we would be notified to go to the next round by May of this year. The full application will be due in June. And then we would, if we were eligible, or if we would get the second grant, then we'd be notified in September. Then we have to actually follow through Section 106 and NEPA because this will be federal funding. So we then have to follow through that process, which could take up to a year. So that's kind of that extended time period that would happen.
Thank you. And it all sounds familiar just because I feel like we went through a similar process with the Campus Park.
Exactly.
Additional federal funding for that. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. That's my questions on that. And I'm glad to hear it's next week because when you said tomorrow, I thought, well, we better get a vote on this, yes or no, by midnight. So, but again, thank you for the explanation on that, Mr. Wolf.
Yeah. Gabriel, you have something?
Oh, I was just going to share that. Thank you so much for taking the time and briefing me more about this. It's in my district, and this was a topic of conversation at my community conversations at the library. And of course, folks want us to get more funding because there's 4 neighborhood chairs in the conversation, and they're definitely in support of this, even if we have to wait a year. However, if we don't get the funding, they said, let's build what we can with what we have, and I think they all just want to see improvements in Durley Park. So thank you for that, and I think the timing of the conversation was perfect.
Councilwoman Perez, you have something?
Yeah, I will make the motion to approve and authorize the recommendation.
Wonderful. I second it. So we have a first and a second. Any speakers on this item, Madam Clerk?
Mayor, we do not have any public speakers in person or virtually. Thank you.
Okay. I just call for the vote. I'm sorry. Councilmember
That's
Wright.
okay. No,
Forgive me.
I'm fine with this. I guess, just to make sure I'm understanding this, really what we're weighing is, do we build a lesser park now? Or do we take the chance on the possibility that we'll get a grant and have an even nicer park a year from now? So I guess it's a trade-off. Do we give people the service they want now, but not nearly as much? It's like the old marshmallow test they gave to kids where, all right, can you wait if you can wait 15 minutes, you get 2 marshmallows, but otherwise you only get 1.
And I would also add to that obviously these are estimates, and the bid environment will dictate what those costs would be. And so there's no guarantee if we go now that we'll get all the elements without having to actually supplement the existing grant. And so there's no guarantee that we'll get this single marshmallow if we go right away.
Right. So I guess I'm going to lean a little bit on Councilmember Rodriguez. I really think this is it's in your area. I think it affects you more than anyone else, and you're more familiar with it than the rest of us. I'm willing to defer to what you prefer. Whether you prefer something now, or do you prefer an opportunity for perhaps something better, but later?
Well, just my conversations with Director Wolf is if we can invest the time, energy, and everything it takes to get the grant, nothing guarantees us that we will be successful in receiving the additional funds. So the recommendation from the community folks that I did speak to, again, it's only about a dozen folks, but folks have had the opportunity to come to public comment and have conversations with us anytime. I would definitely support this application and the process of us trying to get additional funding. So $6 million, here we go.
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, go ahead.
Just real quickly, if it's helpful, on both points by Councilmember Starr and Councilwoman Rodriguez, Mr. Hummel, I see, is here, and he is an incredibly skilled and has quite a track record of grant writing, specifically for our parks and our public spaces. And I want to give him credit on that. From my time with the Parks and Rec Commission, he really rocked and rolled a lot of really great work that has happened since then. And I think he's an absolute asset to the city in the work that he does. And from my time on the Parks and Rec Commission, we were able to approve the $500,000 playground that is in Durley Park now. Prior to that, I'm just trying to remember numbers off the top of my head. I believe the playground prior to that was at least 3.5 or so decades old and still had sand and the little animals that actually didn't rock back and forth anymore. They were just stationary, no slide. And it was, had a small footprint and was, I believe, then Chair Poirier referred to it as a Cold War era feeling type of playground. And so I only bring those things up because in doing community outreach with the folks who live nearest to the park and those in the Bartolo North neighborhood, they have waited a long time for attention for that park. They were very excited for the playground. The fence didn't last its intended amount of time before the playground opened. They were very eager to get to it, which was great. But I will say that they still deserve more and they deserve the best. And whatever we can give them, whether it be through additional grants, absolutely. I'll just offer something that I had mentioned to Mr. Wolf when this similar process came to Campus Park. Any parallel processes that we can do, I'm sure Public Works will continue to do while we're in this kind of holding pattern for this. And if we're granted it, just as we were with Campus Park, great. So those are my comments on that, though. And I think Mr. Wolf has something, Mayor.
I have a question. So if we're to be denied this grant, how long would it be before we actually found that out? Is it just
It's actually on page 398 of the staff report, so the grant
We
award is.
considered May 2025.
Yeah, it's September 2025. So to Mayor Pro Tem's comment, we're not going to stop the current design. We have sufficient funding for the current design. That'll be completed here. I think we're about 80% done. We're through a few plan check comments, and so we'll finish the design. That's not going to stop. That'll be a parallel path item that Mayor Pro Tem talked about. We'll submit the application next week. The first sort of checkpoint will be made. We'll know kind of a yes or no checkpoint there. If we hear no, we'll just continue down the path of finishing the design. If we hear yes, the second checkpoint is the September checkpoint. If we hear no, then we'll certainly be closer to finishing the design and bid it out, and then bring it back to council for consideration if the bids come in higher than the remaining grant amount.
Yeah. Well, if the answer it does end up being no, it's better to find out sooner rather than later, so we can just move on. And because costs seem to be going up each year, the longer we wait to do anything.
That's correct.
Okay. I think we have just call for the vote, Madam Clerk.
Councilwoman Bettis,
Yes.
Mayor MacArthur,
Yes.
Councilman Starr,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Teran,
Yes.
Councilwoman Basua, Councilmember Perallo, Councilwoman Rodriguez,
Aye.
and the motion carries 7-0.
Just a question, because I wasn't clear on this. Who actually made the motion? Who seconded
That
it?
was my question.
Oh.
I made the motion,
Mayor
and then
Thank you.
seconded.
Thank you. We were in the same page
Oh,
there,
were you? Okay.
Councilmember.
So,
I made the motion that Councilwoman Perez seconded.
I must have stepped away again.
We'll move to the next item on the agenda. That's item L5. Last item. No, it's too soon.
Somebody asked us.
This is from Public Works, the subject, a public project agreement with Toro Enterprises for bicycle and pedestrian facilities Northeast Communities and Cloyne Street project. The recommendation is that the City Council approve and authorize, number one, a total of $1,974,588.25 in project funds for the bicycle and pedestrian facilities Northeast Communities and Cloyne Street project. Number two, that the mayor execute an agreement with Toro Enterprises in the amount of $1,645,490.25 for the project, and approve a project contingency amount of $164,549, or approximately 10%, with Toro Enterprises for a total not to exceed value of $1,810,039.25 for the project. And number three, a project allocation amount of $164,549, or approximately 10%, for engineering, inspection, survey, and project management for the project. And number four, a total amount of budget appropriations of $1,020,244,031, consisting of $627,906.42 from the Circulation System Improvement Fee Fund, available fund balance for the Northeast Communities Project, and $392,337.89 from the Mobility Fee Fund, available fund balance for the Cloyne Street project, as well as the corresponding capital outlay fund appropriation increase in the same amounts. Mayor Pro Tem, do you want Mike to, again, you just briefly go over?
Well, I think you already know my question on this. I gave you a preview earlier, so.
Say that again. Oh, yeah, I can start now with the answer to that question.
Yeah.
This is a capital improvement project in the City Council approved capital program. This is a project that includes grant funding. It consists of Class 2 and Class 3 on-street bike lanes, traffic signal, bicycle detection, overhead flashing beacon systems with mast arms, sidewalk improvements, curb extensions, signage, striping, and accessibility improvements. And so it's actually, we have some pretty decent maps in the presentation. If folks have that available to them, actually on page 531, it shows a layout of the Class 2 and the Class 3 locations throughout the city there on the north end. And then on page 532, you can see some of those improvements along Cloyne and Cypress, and then the overhead flashing beacon as it crosses Bard there at Justin Way.
And Mr. Wolf, just for the benefit of the public, if you wouldn't mind sharing, or maybe Mr. Kessler can, when we're looking at Class 2 and Class 3 bike lanes or bike paths, can you just share just a visual what that looks like when folks see those on the road?
Bike facilities, we start talking class 1, class 2, class 3, and there's actually class 4, and there's even a different one that they've come up with. Class 1 is completely separated, multi-purpose. It's not necessarily just a bike lane, multi-purpose. Class 2 is typically on street. It's done with striping, where you have a separated bike facility, but with striping. Class 3 is typically what we call a shared bike lane, or you see them where you have sharrows, where you have the striping that just says share the lane kind of facilities, and you have signs for that. So that the difference between Class 2 and Class 3 is Class 2 has a separated space for those bikes with striping, and then Class 3 you're sharing the space with the vehicles.
Thank you. And I would imagine for folks, if they want a tangible visual, they can go down Gonzales Road between Lantana and Oxnard Boulevard. There's a very clear set aside Class 2 bike lane, as well as Oxnard Boulevard between Robert and Gonzales, freshly paved as well with new striping. And a sharrow, a Class 3, would be on C Street, where I know there's one between Gonzales and I believe Doris.
That's correct. In Class 2, you can actually have different configurations depending on if you have on-street parking. You can have parking on one side. So there's different kinds of layouts for a Class 2. It doesn't always have to be the curb adjacent bike lanes for a Class 2. It doesn't have to be curb adjacent.
All right, thank you for that. And my last question on that, if you wouldn't mind just sharing, on the maps, there's a number of other items, but as well as the items you listed for, bike detection, and then we have curb extensions listed out here. Can we just share, and then the overhead flashing beacon. Can we just share a little bit about what those functionalities are of each of those different items?
Oh, yeah. So the bike detection is part of the traffic signal system. So not normally do bikes trigger the inductive loops. If we have inductive loops for signal detection, if we're going with video detection, it's a lot easier for us to do bike detection. And so that would be the traffic signal bicycle detection. Overhead flashing beacons, that would be in a place where we have potentially a uncontrolled crossing, where we want to draw attention to a crossing with flashing yellow beacons, overhead beacons. I think that's what's happening at Justin Way. And then curb extensions, that is a functionality where we have an existing crosswalk and we are shrinking down the distance that the pedestrian has to be exposed in the street. So we're bringing the sidewalk closer, and some people call it bulb outs, some people call it curb extensions. And so what we're doing is we're reducing the distance that the pedestrian is crossing the street by extending the sidewalk into the street proper, if you will. And then signage and striping, that's pretty self-explanatory. Additional signage, additional striping. That would be the bicycle lanes, the sharrow, stuff like that, or the bicycle signage and or the pedestrian crossing signage.
Great, thank you for that. And I'll just say that in all of those items, first with the bike detection, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe C Street and Gonzales Road, when you're heading west of Gonzales and you turn south on C Street, I believe there is a new camera that's there, or some detection that actually does allow bicycles to trigger the left turn, the protected left turn arrow there, which was a happy accident that I found that. And I had a discussion with a member of the public on, well, what a waste of time. Now every bike is going to cause that to change, and the traffic's going to stop. It's going to cause a bunch of traffic. And my response is, well, they are also vehicles. But also, I would be probably I use a little bit more discretion about when I'm going to do that, and probably when there's less traffic anyways. But I appreciate those being brought in because, again, there are many people who don't have the choice but to travel or commute by bicycle, and they certainly are deserving of safe facilities and safe pathways as much as we can give them. The last thing, just for examples on the curb extensions on A Street over near Winds, I believe there's one there. I think it's between Magnolia and Robert, I guess is what I'm thinking of there. But there's those. But would those be the same as the safe routes to school, or is that a different design we're looking at, where we have more islands that are out there versus curb extensions where it's a full solid cement kind of ramp that goes out?
So it depends on the drainage. So when you have curb extensions that look like I think you're explaining as an island where it looks like it's not connected to the adjacent sidewalk, that typically is done because the drainage pattern it's much more expensive to address the drainage pattern. So we do that so that we keep the cost down, where the drainage pattern can be addressed by still connecting to the existing sidewalk, then we keep the extension connected. So it all kind of depends on what the existing drainage pattern is and how we want to address that, and sort of a cost-benefit discussion or analysis, if you will.
Great, thank you for that. And they are for pedestrian safety, so please park 15 feet or more away from them when you see them. Thank you.
Michael, I'm just appreciative and delighted to see the enhancement in commuter safety in the southern part of our city and just the modernization of it. I'm sure that Councilwoman Perez would join me in that celebration too. But Councilman Pearl, do you have a comment?
If there are no other discussions, I'd move the recommended action, but I would also suggest that Mr. Turan explained, you've been hit twice by cars, so I mean, you could share that, why you have such a passion for this stuff.
Yes.
But not a long discussion, but just, you know.
Oh, no, you asked Councilor Perello.
I gave him a ride back from the bridge event, and he shared that with me, and I had no idea the guy's been hit twice.
And, and by the way, the reason why we should keep it short is because we got to save Greg Runyon's marriage. If he goes out way too late, then I don't know if we'll ever see him again.
Yeah.
Maybe we could put the camera on him for documented proof that he's here. But just very quickly, yes, Councilmember Perello is correct that I have been cycling in the city, and I used to go between here in Camarillo and here in Ventura when I was younger and braver. I have been hit twice, and my entire young adult life and in my adult life, I follow all the traffic rules. I wear a helmet. I stop at the stop signs. I do what you're supposed to do, and but I put a lot of trust. Cyclists put a lot of trust in the drivers that they're going to do what they're supposed to be doing too. And unfortunately, as I told Councilor Perello, I can do every single thing right, follow every single rule. But if it's me versus a car, the car always wins. And so pedestrian and bicycle safety is very important to me. And my biggest thing is I have a privilege where I can choose not to ride a bike because it's cold or it's windy or I don't want to show up sweaty, where many, many of our residents do not have that choice. And I have to recognize and check my own privilege for that. So anyways, I appreciate you, giving me an opportunity to share that, Councilor Perello. It is a very important topic to me. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Let me just recognize Councilwoman Perez. Do you have something? No, you're probably just as excited as I am to see the focus in the south end. I'm sorry, Councilmember Starr, you had something?
Thanks. So I guess the one thing I'm struggling with is just how to gauge the cost and benefit here. To me, when we're looking at $1.1 million and almost 900,000 of it was covered by grants, and it's like, okay, no big deal. I can make that decision every day. I guess I'm having a little bit more trouble with it now that it costs almost twice as much. And given that the amount that we're gonna have to spend is a lot more, it's not just 100,000 or so, it's like roughly $1 million or something like that. I guess my question is, and maybe I'm asking for staff's opinion on this, I guess at some point you'd probably say, you know what, this isn't the best use of our funds. We'd be far better off for safety purposes spending our money elsewhere or for some community benefit purposes elsewhere. do you have any sense, and I realize I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but do you have any sense of where you'd say, you know what? Yeah, I'd do this for 2 million, which is what it is now, but gosh, there's no way in the world I'd do it for 3 or 4.
So the way I would put this is, these are necessary improvements, and I'm glad that we have a grant to cover some of those costs.
Okay.
That's the perspective I would put on this. Rather than it's costing more money, these are improvements that your paid public works director would recommend that we do these. And the fact that we have grant money to cover some of the cost is actually just a benefit.
Right, and your position would be that there isn't a place to spend the money elsewhere that would make us more safe for the same amount of funds?
So we actually went through that exercise. I asked the staff that question. I said, okay, where else could we spend? And the other funding that we're recommending to be spent is actually development impact fees, right? And so these are funds that we get through the development process.
Right.
And we looked at the other projects that we have in the CIP, and we looked at any other projects that we had contemplated, and we could not find another project that didn't already have existing funds that could be that would be eligible for these funding sources from the mobility and the transportation fees. So we went through that exercise, and we did not find one that was of equal value in terms of public improvements to this project.
Yeah, that's very helpful for me, because I always want to know that not only are we getting the best bang for our buck, but I recognize that when we spend money on Project A, that means it's no longer available for Project B, and maybe Project B might have been the better. So I'm glad you're doing that sort of thoughtfulness in your analysis, and that makes me comfortable enough to vote in favor of this.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Councilmember Starr.
Do we have a motion?
We have a motion by,
I'll second.
Okay. Madam Clerk, any public speakers on this item?
Mayor, we have no public speakers on this item.
Okay, call for the vote.
Councilmember Perallo? Yes. Councilwoman Rodriguez?
Aye.
Councilman Starr?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Teran?
Yes.
Councilwoman Basua? Mayor MacArthur?
Yes.
And then Councilwoman Bettis?
Yes.
And the motion carries 7-0. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. There being no further business on the agenda and without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.